There's a strange moment in life when things finally begin to work right after you stop trying to control everything. Have you ever felt that sudden lightness, that unexpected ease the moment you loosen your grip on everything you've been wrestling with? It feels almost unfair, almost mystical, because all our lives, we were raised to believe the opposite. We were taught that success belongs to those who plan every detail, fight every battle, and worry enough to stay ahead of danger. But here's the paradox no one warned you about. The tighter you hold on, the faster life slips through your fingers. Carl Jung, one of the deepest explorers of the human mind, said something unsettling. Worry doesn't make us stronger. It's the ego's way of masking the truth that some things will never be under our control. That truth isn't here to shame you. It's here to wake you up, because worry doesn't protect you or prepare you. It just drains you before life even begins. This is where Jung's view becomes revolutionary. He believed that letting go is not surrender, it is awakening. And the Stoics quietly agreed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Your power is in your response, not in the world around you." In other words, the more energy you waste trying to control the uncontrollable, the less you have left to master yourself. And when you finally stop fighting the current, when you stop clenching your mind around every what if something shifts, life, which once felt chaotic and hostile, begins to reorganize itself quietly, intelligently, without your constant interference. But let's be honest, letting go sounds simple, and it is anything but easy. Because to truly let go, you have to walk into the one place you've avoided the longest, your own inner emptiness. You have to step into the silence beneath your fears, the shadows you've been outrunning for years. And yet, that's exactly where real freedom begins. Not the fake freedom people pose with on social media. Not the freedom that comes from applause, status, or finally getting your life together. I'm talking about a deeper freedom, a freedom that lives inside you. That appears the moment you stop pretending, stop performing, stop trying to control every outcome, and finally, come home to yourself. So in today's video, let's slow down and step beneath the surface together. We're going to explore the psychology behind this paradox. Why does life fall into place only when you stop worrying? And what actually happens inside your soul when you loosen your grip? To answer that, we need to step into Carl Jung's world, a world of unconscious patterns, hidden fears, and the parts of ourselves we rarely dare to meet. But we'll also look through the lens of Stoicism, a philosophy that reminds us, you suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a moment. How many nights have you lost sleep over something that never happened? How many disasters did you live through only in your mind? How many emotional storms did you survive that existed nowhere but inside your imagination? Jung and the Stoics weren't saying the same thing, but they were pointing to the same doorway. Your suffering begins where your illusions begin, and your peace begins the moment those illusions start to fall away. So let's be clear. This is not a magic pill. This isn't one of those shiny promises, just let go and everything will be perfect. Letting go doesn't mean life becomes easy, or that you stop caring, or that you sit back and watch life like a movie. Letting go is something far more courageous. It means you stop trying to control what was never yours to control in the first place. It means you face the parts of you that fear uncertainty. It means you open the inner room you've kept locked for years, the room filled with doubt, insecurity, and shadow. And the moment you step into that room, something extraordinary happens. The fear stops being your master. The ego stops shouting. The world stops feeling like a battlefield. And for the first time, you hear the quiet intelligence of life itself. The part of you that always knew the way, the part the Stoics call your inner citadel, and Jung called the self. So if you've been struggling, drowning in worry, overthinking every choice, tightening your grip until your whole life feels like a clenched fist, this journey is for you. Because the moment you loosen that fist, the moment you stop gripping outcomes, people, identities, and fears, you discover something unexpected. Life was never working against you. It was simply waiting for you to stop getting in the way. And now, let's walk into the first layer of this paradox, the psychological mechanism behind worry and why your ego clings to it like a lifeline. This is where the real unraveling begins. If your mind feels exhausted all the time, it's not because life is too heavy. It's because your ego keeps pulling a fire alarm that isn't real. when that is about the sane offer. Have you noticed that? You're lying safely in your bed, the room is silent, nothing dangerous is happening. Yet inside your head, it feels like an emergency. That isn't just who you are. That is the psychology of worry. And today, we're going to open it up layer by layer. In Jungian terms, worry isn't wisdom or preparation. It's a fog, dense, sticky, misleading, turning neutral moments into threats and ordinary days into danger zones. Jung believed the ego uses worry the way a frightened guard uses a shield. It hates uncertainty so much that it creates the illusion of control. If I think of every possible problem, I'm still in charge. But that isn't control. That's self-imprisonment. Imagine your ego as a jittery warden pacing outside the door of your unconscious, terrified of everything it can't predict. So it keeps shouting, don't relax, don't stop planning, don't let your guard down. And at first, that voice sounds responsible, but slowly it drowns out your intuition, your body signals, and what Jung called the self, the wiser, deeper center of your being. Jung once said, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Meaning, sometimes the mind chooses worry to avoid feeling the real wound underneath. Worry becomes mental painkillers numbing the surface while the infection spreads below. It gives your mind something to do without allowing anything to heal. You've lived this before. Those nights when your body is safe, but your mind is racing with disaster scenarios. What if they don't text back? What if I fail? What if I end up alone? Every what if is a seed, and your imagination is dangerously fertile. Soon, you're lost in a forest of worst-case fantasies that exist nowhere except inside your own mind. That's the essence of worry, abandoning the present moment to live inside imaginary nightmares. The ego loves this because while it's calculating and predicting, it feels important, even though nothing is actually happening. Worry is false labor. It feels like work, but it takes you nowhere, like running hard on a treadmill only to remain in the same spot. The Stoics saw this clearly. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Your mind can torture you with events that never happen. Worry also distorts everything you see like a warped mirror. A single exam becomes, my whole future will collapse. Same event, different lens, only one is true. And over time, this distorted lens becomes a habit. Your brain starts scanning for anything to worry about. Even on peaceful days, the ego whispers, maybe a storm is coming. So you tense up, waiting for thunder that never arrives. But Jung pointed deeper. Worry isn't only about what might happen. It's a way of avoiding what's already inside you. Instead of sitting with uncertainty, which is the natural condition of life, the ego creates noise to avoid the silence. Like a child afraid of the dark, turning on every light instead of realizing the fear isn't in the room, it's in them. We do the same in relationships, clinging, checking, overanalyzing. It looks like we're afraid of losing the other person. But often, we're afraid of losing the version of ourselves we projected onto them, our worth, our meaning, our safety. So worry isn't your enemy. It's a signal like smoke from a burning room. But instead of checking what's on fire, the ego uses a fan to blow the smoke away. We stay busy, think positive, distract ourselves, while the real issue keeps burning. That's why worry never truly disappears. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you don't see worry for what it is, a veil, a diversion, you let it drive your life while believing you're just unlucky. One of the clearest metaphors is the horse and reins. The ego puts the reins, tension, control, worry into your hands and says, if you let go, life will throw you off. But the truth is the opposite. Life has its own rhythm, its own intelligence. It doesn't need your panic to function. The moment you loosen your grip, something returns. Space, breath, clarity, the ability to respond instead of react. And remember, worry is not your true nature. Children prove this. Before they learn fear, they run in the rain, fall, laugh, rise. They don't catastrophize. They live. Anxiety is learned built from old wounds, expectations, and an ego terrified of the unknown. And anything learned can be unlearned. So when Jung says, when you stop worrying, everything falls into place, he isn't selling optimism. He means worry never prepared you. It was never your shield. It was only the ego's way of avoiding the dark. When you finally see this mechanism clearly, When you understand how your mind has been tricking you, you loosen your grip on control and step into a deeper, calmer kind of power. And that leads us to the next question. If worry is the trap, then what does real letting go actually look like? Let's explore that in part 2. Sometimes the moment you stop fighting for control is the moment your life finally stops fighting you back. Let that line settle for a second, because most of us were trained to believe the opposite. We grew up hearing, try harder, push more, never let go. But no one told us the truth. Gripping too tightly can drown you just as quickly as giving up. Carl Jung understood this paradox deeply. Letting go isn't the behavior of someone who's defeated. It's the behavior of someone finally waking up. Picture yourself trapped in a whirlpool. Your arms thrash, your legs kick, you fight with every ounce of strength. And the harder you fight, the faster you sink. But when you stop struggling, something unexpected happens. Your body begins to float. That shift from resistance to clarity is the essence of letting go. And it's nothing like laziness. In a world obsessed with productivity, motion, and relentless ambition, slowing down looks suspicious. People will assume you're passive, unmotivated, falling behind. But real letting go has nothing to do with quitting. Letting go means acting from presence instead of panic, from wisdom instead of fear. This is where Stoicism and Jung meet. The Stoics said, do what you can, release what you can't. Not once did they say, stop acting. They simply refused to tie their worth to outcomes. That's the crucial difference. When you act to prove yourself, anxiety follows like a shadow. When you act because it is your nature, peace arrives naturally. Think about creativity. Many artists say their best work appears not through force, but through surrender. As if something rises from the deep the moment they stop trying to be brilliant. Paul McCartney famously said the melody for Yesterday came to him in a dream, not in an all-night war with perfection. Greatness often enters only after the ego steps aside. Letting go is like opening a window in a stuffy room. The ego keeps the curtain shut, terrified that dust or chaos might enter. But in doing so, it blocks oxygen, warmth, and light. Once you pull the curtains back, you realize the world outside wasn't nearly as threatening as your ego insisted. That's why letting go is an act of courage. It asks you to leave the illusion of safety and enter the rhythm of real life. It asks you to trust that reality has an intelligence deeper than your anxiety. Consider this: when you base your worth on results, success, recognition, perfection, worry will always return because outcomes are unstable. They shift, they break, they collapse. Letting go is shifting from, I act to prove who I am, to, I act because this is who I am. A poet doesn't write for applause. They write because the poem is the breath their soul needs to exhale. A person in love doesn't love to possess. They love because love is a way of being, not a contract. Here's an image Jung would love. Imagine the ego gripping a bow and arrow so tightly that the arrow can't move. It believes releasing the grip means losing control. But letting go is not the collapse of effort. It's the moment the arrow is finally allowed to fly. Letting go is not passive. It requires more honesty, awareness, and presence than clinging ever did. Think of a mountain climber. They train, prepare, study the terrain, but once on the mountain, they must cooperate with what they cannot control. The wind, the rock, the shifting weather. They have to know when to tense and when to relax. This isn't laziness. This is intelligent cooperation with reality. Psychologically, letting go means shifting the driver's seat from the ego to the self, the deeper, centered, intuitive part of you. The ego thinks in straight lines. If A happens, then B happens. The self communicates through intuition, symbols, subtle knowing. It doesn't demand a map. It asks for attention. Imagine walking into an unfamiliar forest. The ego panics. Where's the exact path? The self whispers, be here, notice, let the forest teach you. In therapy, people who try to heal quickly often stay stuck the longest. Healing begins only when they accept that emotional wounds unfold in their own time. Letting go isn't quitting healing. It's cooperating with the psyche's deeper intelligence. Life isn't a machine you program. It's a river you learn to swim with. The lazy person sits on the bank. The controller fights the current until they collapse. But the awakened one, the one who lets go, floats, adapts, swims, and reaches shores others never touch. If worry is the ego's fire alarm, letting go is turning off the siren and hearing, perhaps for the first time, the quiet voice of your true self. And once you hear that voice, you can't go back, because you finally understand life wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to be lived. And that brings us into the next part of this journey. If letting go is awakening, what exactly are we awakening from? Your anxiety isn't just about what might happen. It's about who you think you'll stop being if things go wrong. That's the quiet terror beneath so many sleepless nights. Deep down, most of us aren't only afraid of losing a job, a relationship, a title, or a certain image. We're afraid that without those things, we won't know who we are. This is where anxiety really begins. Not out there in the world, but in a silent inner sentence. I am my job. I am this relationship. I am the version of me other people admire. Carl Jung had a word for that version: the persona. The persona is the social mask we wear so we can function in the world. The competent professional, the strong one, the perfect parent, the put-together friend. At first, that mask is useful. We all need roles. We all need a way to show up. But the danger begins when we forget it's a mask and start believing it's the whole of who we are. That's when the mask turns into a prison. Imagine a man who is successful by every external standard, respected at work, well paid, admired by his family. On the outside, he looks unshakable. On the inside, he's constantly bracing for impact. Why? Because somewhere along the way, a belief took root. If I stop being successful, I stop being worthy. Now, a small mistake isn't just a mistake. A bit of criticism isn't just feedback. They feel like attacks on his existence. His anxiety isn't really about the email or the presentation. It's about the terror that if the mask cracks, there will be nothing left behind it. We see the same pattern in love. A woman checks her phone 100 times a day. Did he text back? Is he distant? Is something wrong? She analyzes every word, every pause, every emoji. On the surface, it looks like she's afraid of losing him. But underneath, the fear is more raw. If he stops loving me, maybe I'm not lovable. The relationship has become a mirror. She's no longer looking at who he really is. She's looking at what his attention says about her value. If the mirror shakes, her entire sense of self shakes with it. Jung called this projection. We don't see people as they are. We cast our unmet needs and hidden wounds onto them. We write a script in our minds and then feel anxious, angry, or heartbroken when they refuse to play the role we assigned. In that sense, anxiety isn't just fear of reality. It's fear that reality won't match the movie in our head. The ego whispers, everything must go this way. I must succeed. I must be loved. I must always be strong. Life, of course, doesn't obey must. And the gap between how things are and how we insist they should be becomes the birthplace of suffering. Here's a simple image. Imagine holding a crystal vase, expensive, flawless, beautiful. You're terrified of dropping it. Every step feels dangerous. Not because walking is dangerous, but because you've decided this vase must never break. That's what happens when we turn the persona into our identity. We carry our image of the strong one, the successful one, the good one. Like that perfect vase, we're not just living anymore. We're guarding, rehearsing, managing, performing. The Stoics warned about this too. Epictetus said we're like actors on a stage. We're given roles rich, poor, praised, criticized, sick, healthy. Our job is not to cling to the role. Our job is to play it with virtue. And remember that we are more than the costume. When we forget that, life becomes a stage we never step off. We feel we must be on all the time, always composed, always impressive, always in control. Anxiety becomes a silent disease spreading through everything. You smile at work, then panic alone in the bathroom. You play the supportive friend, then collapse in your car afterward, too tired to feel anything. You're like a burned out actor, exhausted backstage, but still forcing yourself under the spotlight. At some point, you have to ask, am I protecting my life or just protecting my mask? If my titles, roles, and labels disappeared tomorrow, would I still recognize the person in the mirror? Jung reminded us, The persona is meant to be a bridge between your inner world and the outer one. It was never meant to be your whole identity. So when we fully identify with the mask, every crack feels like catastrophe. A small insult keeps you awake all night. A normal failure feels like an existential crisis, not because the event is too big, but because we've hung our entire self-worth on it. Here's the paradox. The more we try to maintain a perfect image, the farther we drift from what is real and human in us. A leader terrified of looking weak can never say, "I'm struggling." They lead in isolation, admired but unknown. A mother obsessed with being the perfect mom never allows herself to be tired, frustrated, or overwhelmed. She pushes everything down until her mind and body can't hold it anymore. In both cases, anxiety isn't random. It's the natural response to living too far away from your real self. Anxiety grows in the distance between who you are and who you're allowed to be. Jung put it starkly, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Why terrifying? Because it means stepping beyond the mask. It means allowing yourself to be complex, contradictory, imperfect, real, and that feels dangerous to an ego that survives on performance. But here's the turning point. The root of your anxiety is not out there, not the market, not your boss, not your partner, not your family. Its deepest root is the inner agreement that says, I am only as worthy as my image. I am only as safe as my role. If this picture breaks, I disappear. That's the lie anxiety is built upon. The truth is quieter but far more solid. You existed before the role. You existed before the title. You existed before the relationship, the success, the failure, the applause, and you will still exist after. Seen this way, anxiety becomes a signal, not that you are broken, but that you've been living more for expectations than for essence. And when you start to see this clearly, something inside you shifts. You're no longer just asking, how do I stop worrying? You begin to ask a deeper question. Who am I if I'm not my mask? And that question is not the end of you. It's the doorway to a different kind of freedom. In the next part, we'll walk step by step through how to move from this mask-driven anxiety into a real process of transformation. From worry to inner freedom. You don't heal by killing your anxiety. You heal by listening to what it's been trying to tell you. Let that settle for a moment. Most of us treat anxiety like an enemy to be defeated. We medicate it, outrun it, numb it, negotiate with it. But Carl Jung offered a revolutionary insight. The goal is not to erase anxiety, but to transform it. This isn't a hack, a mindset trick, or a motivational slogan. It's a journey, a subtle pilgrimage from the darkness of fear into the steady, grounded light of inner freedom. As we walk through it, ask yourself quietly, where am I on this path right now? 1. Recognition. Seeing the storm without becoming the storm. When anxiety rises, the ego responds in predictable ways. It suppresses the feeling. It hides in work. It chases approval. It fills every silence with noise. From the outside, this looks productive. From the inside, it's pure avoidance. Jung invites us to do the opposite. Not run, not fight, simply observe. Imagine standing under a porch during a thunderstorm. You feel the wind, hear the thunder, watch the rain, but you also know the storm is not the entire sky. Your anxiety is the storm. Your awareness is the sky. This shift is small but life-changing. The moment you say, I am noticing anxiety, instead of, I am anxiety, you've already created space to breathe. Consider love. Someone terrified of rejection often overchecks, overthinks, clings, analyzes, but when they pause and turn inward, a deeper question appears. Am I afraid of losing this person or losing the feeling of being loved? That question slices through illusion. It reveals that the anxiety isn't about the person. It's about a wound within. Recognition is that moment where the trigger is no longer mistaken for the root. And that alone begins the unraveling. 2. Confrontation, sitting with what you've been running from. Recognition is seeing the storm. Confrontation is stepping into it with steady breath. This isn't a Hollywood fight with fear. It's quieter, more courageous, more uncomfortable. It means allowing yourself to feel the things you've avoided for years. The fear of being abandoned, the fear of being ordinary, the fear of failing publicly, The fear of being invisible. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. To wake up, you must open doors inside your heart you've kept locked for a lifetime." In practice, confrontation looks like this. You stop numbing out with scrolling. You sit still for 10 minutes and notice the tightness in your chest. You admit, even silently, "That comment hurt me more than I showed." You whisper to yourself, "I'm scared of failing." You allow your body to tremble, breathe, soften. At first, the emotion feels like a tidal wave, but something paradoxical happens. When you stop running, the wave passes, slowly, imperfectly, but it passes. If you've ever cried after weeks of holding it together, you know the relief that follows. The body softens, the mind clears, the storm loses its teeth. Even the Stoics, often misunderstood, never told you to suppress pain. They said, "Feel what is real. Do not add unnecessary suffering on top." That is confrontation, feeling the truth without the story. 3. Release the shift from protecting your image to living your life. When recognition opens the door and confrontation clears the room, release begins. Jung called this the redistribution of psychic energy. Energy once wasted on guarding your image now returns to the self. Think of someone whose identity was tied to work. Mistakes crushed them. Emails triggered panic. Their worth lived inside numbers and performance. But as they see the pattern and confront the childhood wound behind it, something subtle shifts. Work stops being a stage. It becomes a canvas. They don't stop caring. They care differently. Less fear, more freedom. The inner dialogue shifts from "I must succeed or I am nothing" to "I grow whether I succeed or fail," or consider someone who once clung to love like a lifeline. Through this process, they reclaim their center. Love becomes an offering, not a survival strategy. They can finally say, "I want you, but I don't need you to complete me." That is release. Let me show you this through a story. A young artist prepares for his first exhibition. For months, he barely sleeps. His mind loops. What if no one comes? What if they laugh? What if I'm a fraud? He tightens, perfects, fixes, rearranges, but the anxiety only grows. One exhausted morning, he tries something different. He stops running. He feels the fear directly, not just the fear of failing now, but the fear of being judged his whole life. The childhood memories, the comparisons, the shame. He cries for the kid who never felt good enough. And slowly, the grip loosens. The exhibition stops being a test. It becomes a translation of his inner world. The night of the show, the anxiety isn't gone, but it's softer. He's not there to earn existence. He's there to share truth. Ironically, that's when people connect the most. Not because he killed anxiety, but because he transformed his relationship to it. This is Jung's definition of inner freedom. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to let fear exist without letting it rule. Think of a surfer. They don't demand calm waters. They learn to balance on moving waves. Jung used images like forests and cocoons to explain this. The forest at night feels terrifying, but once your eyes adjust, you notice paths, streams, life. The cocoon feels like death to the caterpillar, but inside, wings are forming. Anxiety feels like that cocoon, tight, dark, suffocating. But if you stay with the process, recognize, confront, release, transformation begins. Here it is in one line: recognition, confrontation, release. Each step invites you to stop defending the mask and start revealing the self. Anxiety stops being a prison guard and becomes a doorway, a signal that something in you is ready to evolve. In that space, the ego steps aside. The self, the deeper, wiser center, begins to guide. This is inner freedom, not freedom from life, but freedom to live within life fully. And if this journey resonates with you, then watching this video might already be your quiet first step, a small act of courage toward a freer inner world. In the next part, we'll explore what happens outside you when these inner shifts begin, how life itself seems to rearrange. When you stop letting anxiety run the show, life doesn't start working when you control everything. It starts working when you finally stop strangling it. You felt this, haven't you? You spend years overthinking every step, micromanaging every detail, tightening your grip on everything that matters. and somehow things still fall apart. Then there are those rare seasons when you stop obsessing for a moment. You exhale, you loosen your grip, you do your part, and then you let the rest be. And suddenly, life feels lighter. Conversations flow. Ideas arrive out of nowhere. The right people show up at the right time. It almost feels unfair, as if the moment you stop forcing life, life finally has room to move. This isn't magic. It's the paradox Carl Jung and the Stoics were both pointing to, from two different directions. One, less force, more alignment. Jung believed there is a deeper organizing principle inside each of us. He called it the self, an inner center and inner compass at the same time. Quiet, patient, always there, even when the ego is screaming. When the ego is in charge, everything feels urgent. Nothing feels safe. Life looks like chaos you have to outrun. The ego shouts, if I don't control this, everything will fall apart. So you tighten, push, interfere, obsess. But when the ego steps back just a little, the self finally has room to work. And then something strange happens. Random events start to make sense. The right opportunities arrive at unexpected moments. Pieces of your life that felt scattered begin to slide into place. Not according to your fantasy, but according to a deeper, more natural order. The Stoics described the same reality in different words. They said, focus on what you can control, your actions, your character, your choices, and release what you can't, outcomes, timing, opinions, accidents. The more you live this way, the more life begins to feel like it's with you, not against you. 2. The garden, why forcing things backfires. Imagine you're tending a small garden. You plant a young seedling. You're desperate for it to grow faster. So every day you go outside and tug on its stem, pulling it upward, telling yourself you're helping. What happens? You tear the roots. You weaken the plant. You might kill the very thing you were trying to protect. But if you water the soil, remove the weeds, give it sunlight and space, and then let time and nature do their work, the plant grows. Not by force. By design, anxiety is like tugging that seedling. You think you're being responsible. You replay every conversation, predict every outcome, calculate every risk. You call it being careful. But in reality, you're tearing at the roots of your own life. Letting go of worry doesn't mean abandoning the garden. It means finally trusting that life has its own rhythm. Your job is care, not control. 3. Letting go is not equal to losing control. Let's make one thing clear. Letting go of worry is not the same as giving up. It's not, whatever happens, happens, I don't care. It's this, I will show up fully, and I will stop trying to own the parts that were never mine. Again, those rue, they are bang, they are in the skull. It's giving life back, the right to move according to its nature. Through Jung's lens, this is what happens when the ego stops dictating every detail and allows the self, the deeper organizing principle, to guide. Through the Stoic lens, it's the difference between obsessing over whether the ship will reach the shore and focusing on how you sail while accepting the wind, the current, the weather. You still act. You still work, love, plan, prepare, but you act from clarity, not from panic. 4. When life moves through you. Think of the rare moments when you were in flow, so absorbed in what you were doing that time seemed to disappear. Artists know this feeling. A musician stops worrying about the audience and lets the music move through them. Suddenly, a melody appears they could never have forced into existence. An athlete stops staring at the scoreboard and returns to the rhythm of their breath, their body, the game itself. They run farther, play better, feel lighter. In those moments, anxiety loosens its grip. The energy that used to be trapped in worry becomes available for presence, creativity, and performance. That's not a coincidence. It's what happens when control relaxes just enough for life to flow through you instead of being choked by you. 5. The lake and the sky. Your mind is like a lake. Worry is the wind constantly disturbing its surface. When the water is turned up, all you see are ripples and distortions. You can't see what's beneath the surface. You can't see the reflection above it. But when the lake grows still, not frozen, just calm, The sky appears in it with stunning clarity. The sky was always there. The mountains were always there. The reflection was always possible. You just hadn't let the water rest long enough to notice. That's what happens when anxiety settles. Reality was always here. Many of the answers you needed were already inside you. They just couldn't be seen through the constant ripples of fear. 6. What changes outside when you change inside? This inner shift doesn't stay inside. It echoes into your outer life. Someone who once feared failure, when they release the obsession with never failing, they often become more effective. They're no longer acting from panic, but from focus. Someone who once panicked about being abandoned, when they loosen their grip, their relationships become healthier. They're no longer suffocating the other person with fear. Love finally has room to breathe. Think of a student before an exam. When they're flooded with anxiety, hand shaking, heart racing, mind spinning, their memory shuts down. But when they take a breath and accept, I've prepared, I'll do my best, that's enough. Their nervous system calms. Their mind opens. They perform closer to their true potential. This isn't good vibes only. It's literally how the nervous system works. 7. From emergency mode to balance. Anxiety locks your body into fight or flight, as if there's a tiger in the room. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense, blood leaves your thinking brain and rushes to survival systems. That's useful if you're running from real danger. It's terrible if you're just opening an email, walking into a meeting, or having a difficult conversation. When you stop feeding worry, your nervous system slowly returns to balance. In that regulated state, creativity comes back, intuition becomes clearer, empathy and connection become possible again. Letting go of worry isn't just a mindset, it's a full body reset. 8. Acting without anxiety. Stopping worry does not mean stopping action. You still work, you still love, you still set boundaries, make plans, build a future, but the quality of your effort changes. You're no longer flailing in the water, splashing in every direction. You're like someone rowing down a river who has finally learned to listen. When the current speeds up, you steady your oar. When the water calms, you rest your arms. You move with the river, not against it. That's what it feels like when the ego stops behaving like a dictator and starts working with the self instead of over it. Life stops being something you must constantly wrestle into shape and becomes a living process moving through you. 9. From master to visitor. At this point, anxiety doesn't vanish, but it changes roles. It stops being the master and becomes a visitor. What once triggered panic now becomes information. I'm anxious. What expectation am I clinging to right now? What image of myself am I trying so hard to protect? Where am I trying to control what was never mine to control? In that awareness, you begin to see what Jung and the Stoics both understood. When you stop worrying, life doesn't suddenly bend to your ego's wishes. It begins to unfold the way it was meant to. And that realization is the beginning of a completely different relationship with existence. In the final part of this journey, we'll bring everything together so that in the moments you're most afraid, you'll remember how to return to that inner place where you're no longer controlled by worry, but guided by something far deeper. The real question isn't how to stop worrying, it's whether you're brave enough to trust life again. Most people think the destination of this journey is calm, silence, relief, the absence of anxiety. But the truth is far deeper, almost sacred. This entire journey is leading you back to a moment of choice. Will you keep fighting life, or will you finally let it unfold? Because somewhere in your life right now, there is a river you're trying to dam with your bare hands, a relationship you're trying to force into certainty, a job you're gripping out of fear, a future you're trying to predict down to the last detail. And somewhere else, there is a garden you're tugging at, yanking its stems to make it grow faster, believing urgency will create maturity. But the more you pull, the more the roots tear. So let me ask you 3 questions. Not to judge, not to shame, but to open a crack of truth inside you. What river are you trying to control when you should be learning to float? What garden are you forcing when patience is the real nourishment? And if you stopped gripping so tightly, what in your life might finally bloom? These are not poetic questions. They are psychological ones. Jung would say they point to the deepest split inside us, between the imaginary world our ego tries to build and the living world we're actually in. The hardest part of stopping worry is not technique or breathing exercises or staying mindful. The hardest part is trust. Trusting that life moves with an intelligence greater than your control. Trusting that you don't have to see 5 miles ahead to take the next step. Trusting that you are not alone with your fear, that something deeper in you is already guiding you. Stoicism called this inner alignment with nature. Jung called it the self. Modern psychology calls it regulation, coherence, integration. Different names, same experience. When you're present, really present, your whole being shifts from tension to openness. The moment you stop arguing with life, life stops arguing with you. Let me put this in everyday language. When you stop worrying, you stop wasting energy fighting shadows. You stop confusing imagination with reality. You stop treating every inconvenience as a disaster. You stop interpreting uncertainty as danger. In other words, you finally return to what is instead of living in what if. Think about this for a moment. How many things in your life have you feared that never actually happened? How many sleepless nights were built on illusions? How many times were you fighting a ghost that your own mind created? And how many beautiful moments did you miss because you were too busy bracing for a future that never came? When you see this clearly, not intellectually, but viscerally, something inside you softens. You stop being at war with yourself. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You stop living as if life is an enemy to outsmart. You begin, slowly, to trust again. And trust transforms everything. Your breath deepens, your shoulders drop, your decisions become clearer, your relationships become kinder, your mind becomes quieter, your creativity returns, your intuition wakes up. You begin to feel something you might not have felt in years, yourself. The real beginning of inner freedom is not the absence of fear. It's the separation of reality from illusion. When you see your anxious thoughts for what they are, distorted mirrors, not warnings, you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. And ironically, the moment you loosen your grip, life takes you farther than all your pushing ever could. Because life is not a machine you need to control. It's a river to move with, a forest to walk through, a lake to breathe beside, a rhythm to inhabit. When you stop fighting the current, you begin to feel its support. When you stop fearing the shadows, you begin to notice the light they hide. When you stop pulling the garden, you begin to witness its grace. That is the quiet miracle of this journey. And so the real question, the question this entire video has been slowly guiding you toward, is not, how do I stop worrying? That's an ego question, a control question, a fix me now question. The real question is this: do I have the courage to trust the rhythm of my own life? Because if the answer is yes, even if it's a trembling, hesitant yes, something shifts instantly. A door opens, a space appears, a breath returns, and in that space, life is no longer a burden to manage, a puzzle to solve, a threat to outmaneuver, or a performance to maintain. Life becomes what it always wanted to be: an experience to live, a mystery to trust, a path to walk with presence and honesty, and maybe, just maybe, a place where you can finally rest. In the end, the moment you stop worrying is the moment life begins to move again. Not the way you planned, but the way it was meant to.